Global Transformation Astrology, GTA, with William Stickevers.
So we've seen Russia and the United States meet in Saudi Arabia, top diplomats discussing negotiating an end to the war in Ukraine, despite not having any officials from Kiev at the table. So let me break down what they agreed. Now, one of the things I looked at here is the fact that the upcoming eclipse in March, eclipse season, we see that eclipse right on the Russian Federation midheaven, right on the world point, making a direct hit to the Russian North Node, South Node, and it has a node Uranus conjunction. So both sides agree to pursue a number of goals. They decide we're going to allow backstaffing at their respective embassies in Washington and Moscow to establish high-level teams to support the peace talks. They're going to restore relations and economic cooperation between the U.S. and Russia, meaning we're going to take the sanctions off, we're going to start trading again. Rubio stressed that any agreement must be acceptable, not only just to the U.S. and Russia, but to Ukraine and to our European allies. However, Lavrov, I believe he's like the Secretary of State of Russia, basically said negotiations with Ukraine remain a non-starter so long as Zelensky refuses to hold elections. Trump's team agreed that Zelensky is operating as a dictator, right? So basically he suspended all elections. He put the country under martial law after Russia's invasion in February 2022. And basically, he's no longer running a democracy. He's running it as a dictator. And they're saying this is technically illegal. So they asked Zelensky, hey, we need you to run elections. You get reelected. That's fine. You get to sign off. But there's only about a 4% chance that Zelensky will be elected. He knows this. Zelensky says, no way, no election. I'm not signing anything. Nothing changes. Now Zelensky's going over to the UK, convincing them, hey, you back me. I'll join the EU. I want to be part of NATO. Meanwhile, the US is completely pulling out. So Zelensky's desperate. Zelensky's not going to be around too much longer because something's likely to happen to him, right? And he doesn't have any fans inside of Kiev. A lot of people said, you know, you want to get rid of him, we'll do it for you. So Zelensky's going to be out. So in other words, they both agreed, we're going to make sure whoever gets elected, will give them a sweetheart deal, give Ukraine like $435 billion to rebuild. And the Russians agreed to establish the Donbass and Crimea, and then we'll sign a treaty, an agreement never to invade, and Ukraine will never become part of NATO. And basically, the plan is to implement a ceasefire by April 20th. Elections will be held, and then there'll be a signing final agreement. So this has all been settled, but they basically locked up this agreement inside of 4 hours. So that is what is likely to happen. It looks like Russia is going to get pretty much what it wants in terms of the land holdings, and then the U.S. will be able to negotiate and force the Russians into compliance that they will never invade Ukraine and all that type of stuff. So the problem is, of course, is the Europeans don't want to go along with it. They want to keep the war going. You now have Macron and Starmer in the U.K. basically talking about having a war council, which is insane because as we all know, if you don't have the U.S. involved, they have absolutely no chance in the field. The British soldiers won't last long, and the French soldiers will last even less. We've never seen a prime minister, certainly since the First World War, go in defiance of a U.S. president on an issue concerning Europe. So I believe Starmer is finished too. I think this is the beginning of the end. Wrap it in. I don't know how they can call elections yet in Britain, but I see Starmer going down, especially because what Britain and France are doing, and Germany, by the way, decided we're not going to be part of this. Germany just told Starmer and Macron, we are not part of this. But they said, what you're doing could trigger World War III. So I think the U.S. is going to twist some arms in the UK. We may see Trump hit them with heavy sanctions and start, serving them divorce papers or something like that, or threatening to. So at any rate, there's a little more here. I do want to mention these lines, these astrolocality lines come directly from the Sun Aries ingress. And notice all these lines going over through Mexico, particularly the Mars line. And what I noticed here was right now there's reports the CIA is flying the MQ-9 spy drone over Mexico as the U.S.-Mexican cartel war nears. So the U.S. is planning what they describe as training missions to offer a clearer picture for Trump to develop a strategy to do deep, heavy, powerful military strikes on Mexican cartels, which have fueled a drug death catastrophe of 100,000 Americans per year. Also, the child trafficking, women trafficking, sex trafficking, you know what I'm getting at, right? So now Trump can do this because these cartels that are operating in Mexico are foreign terrorist organizations. So now he has the power of the military presidency to order them to do these strikes. So these strikes are coming. Now, it's around the time of the eclipse, we're going to hear nothing, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 right? So it'll be interesting to see when I look at the lines here, particularly at that Mars line above Mexico City. We may just see like right in this area here, you'll probably see the first set of military strikes happening. So these are not going to be like limited. They're going to hit them really hard, destroy their entire infrastructure. They're going to arrest their leadership. They're going to seize all properties, banks, accounts. They're going to do it in one swift, big way. Maybe the cartels know it's coming. I don't know. Maybe they don't think anything's going to happen, but it's going to happen. Now, one of the big issues happening right now in the EU, the EU is like falling apart. But what is concerning here about Europe, amongst the things that I talked about, why the demographic collapse is going to come to a head this year, along with the industrial collapse, is the fact that Germany, before I go into the astrology, Germany's economy is as big as 22 of its neighbors. So the 2024 GDP of Germany is 4.6 trillion, and the highlighted countries of Norway, Sweden, Finland, Belarus, Poland, all those countries, Romania, etc., all of them together are only 4.6 trillion. Well, actually the same. So in other words, these countries here in the yellow have 157 million people compared to Germany's 84.6, which still generates as much or more GDP per year. So now that we established that, Germany is basically, it's the technological and industrial powerhouse of Europe. Here's the problem. German GDP has had no growth for 6 years. So German business model based on cheap energy from Russia, growing exports to China, and cheap subcontractors in Eastern Europe is gone. The demographic crisis looms. It's already here, but depending on what source you use, I say it's already here. There's not enough young people for the manufacturing jobs. And the young people that they do have don't want to do those jobs. And they don't want more Turkish people. And the ones who come from the Middle East are not trained or educated enough to fill a lot of those job positions. They don't have the work ethic. Not everyone, many of them. Because, you're 27 years old, you grew up in Syria, you come to Germany, you got to master the language, you got to master the work ethic and culture there, right? Probably not going to happen. So there is uncontrolled immigration in the social system still occurring. So if Germany is stalled for 6 years and it does not have enough fuel for manufacturing, does not have enough trained workers, it's going through all of this, right? On top of that, China's BYD is a Chinese EV automaker, is selling about twice as many electric vehicles as all German car makers combined. And this is what happens when a country wants to stick to regulations from the last century and corporations are busy dealing with unions and work councils instead of running the business to make a profit. So in other words, Germany has decided, hey, we want to go green. We're very concerned about workers and keeping them happy and all that stuff. And I get that. But look what's happened now. China is dominating, not Germany. So leadership matters, folks. And people say it doesn't matter who's president, who's chancellor, no, it does matter. So let's go back to the astrology. Will the EU overturn the German election results if AfD does well? So Germany is set to hold federal election on February 23rd, 2025, following the collapse of Chancellor Olaf Scholz's three-party coalition government in December last year. The conservative CDU-CSU is currently leading in the polls with the populist, pro-German, let's make Germany great, anti-immigrant AfD, right? They're calling it alt-right, but when I actually read what AfD stands for, it just sounds very similar to what MAGA in America stands for, which, by the way, AfD has been endorsed by Elon Musk and is now in second place and rising fast in the polls leading up to the election. So the upcoming election is, in effect, a de facto referendum on the fiscal reform given This was the reason the last government failed, and the proposal from the leading parties would challenge the debt breaks in the current form. So in other words, this is a reform of the entire German government, all the decisions it made, its woke policies, etc. And we see this eclipse happening right on Germany's midheaven. What do you think that means about AfD? They might do better than anyone's anticipating. I don't know if they're going to get first place, but it may be a razor thin close second place. And here's the point. When Romania last held elections and the Brussels, the EU elite, did not like the outcome of that election, they found some scant evidence that this was Russian interference and we're annulling the election. We're annulling the election result. In other words, we're overriding you. We in Brussels, who are not elected, are going to tell you in Romania what you're going to do, who your leader is going to be, because we say so and we know better. Now there's discussion in Brussels saying it doesn't matter if AfD does better. AfD, who wants to basically break out of the euro and thinks it's a joke and it's holding Germany back, which it is, along with Italy, right? They're going to annul the election. That's what this eclipse could also mean. That's not a steadfast prediction, but I'm going to tell you something right now. If they do well and Brussels basically tries to annul the election, we could see the beginning of the end of the Eurozone. I'm not saying immediately, but when the Eurozone can annul elections, what does that say? Remember, these people are not elected. They're a bunch of elitists who get selected for the position. So that is the other big thing coming to a theater near you.
To watch the full presentation and more like this on geopolitics, the economy, and world events from an archetypal and mundane astrological perspective, join the Global Transformation Astrology membership. Go to gta.williamstickevers.com. Become a GTA member today.